just, I suppose all of you students have attended the previous sessions. Okay. So maybe if there are newcomers, we just take a quick recap. At the first session, see, this course is basically about the theology of laity that looks at the mission of the laity in the church. And as we said in the first class, laity signifies the ordinary people, the Christian faithful who are not clerics. Okay. So up to Vatican II, there was no notion of theology of laity or mission of the laity. You know, in our conventional understanding, the laity only had to go pray in the church, give offerings, and obey whatever the clergymen told them. Okay, so it is only after Vatican II, which has been a very significant historical landmark in the history of the Catholic Church, there is a new understanding of the theology of the laity and what the mission of the laity would be in the church, in the world. Okay, both. And there is a recognition that laity upholds the mission of the church, which is something very beautiful. That is why I'm really happy, you know, Paul and his team have designed this course, you know, so that as young people, if we really get into a right understanding of who is laity and what is the mission of the laity, it is very meaningful to live our Christian life and our vocation. Okay, so the apostolate of the laity. See, earlier the word apostolate was only related to nuns and priests. Okay, if you know in your countries, nuns will say, our apostolate is teaching, our apostolate is hospital work, social work, etc. What is the apostolate of the laity? And as I said in the first class, apostolate signifies sharing in the mission of the church. You would know from the Gospels, apostle is the one who is sent. Okay, so it is very beautiful that we as Christian faithful, by virtue of our baptism, share in this mission. We are also sent. By whom? Maybe not, you know, kind of, there is no laying of hands on us and say, come on with this mission. But by virtue of our baptism and by our confirmation, we are sent by the Spirit of God, which is so beautiful. Okay, so that is the foundation. And from there, so in the first class, we looked at the document from Vatican II on the laity, which is Apostolic Activity in English. In the second class, we looked at this document called Aparecida Document. And as I said last time, Aparecida is a place in Brazil where the Episcopal conferences, just as we have FABC in Asia, the Episcopal Conference of Latin America and the Caribbean, they met at Aparecida and they produced this very beautiful document. It's a very, very long document. Okay. I was supposed to do both. You know, when Paul Wang asked me, he said, do chapter 8 and chapter 10. But when I read through, chapter 8 itself is very intense. That is why I took chapter 8 last time, just for us to understand what is the mission of the kingdom of God, the reign of God. And there also, last class, we looked at how, you know, the reign of God is at the heart of Christianity because Jesus initiated that. Okay, and how Jesus, you know, gave this powerful message. Unless you are born again, and our baptism is meant to be our rebirth, that gives us this vision. And how from the Gospels we understand the reign of God is founded on justice, inclusion, equality, love. These are like founding principles, the pillars of the reign of God. Okay. And I was sharing with you also in King's theology, we define the reign of God or the kingdom of God as the kingdom because it's based on kinship, relationships beyond family boundaries. Okay, it is relationality, and that is something we're going to look at. We're not going to look exactly at the kingdom of God, but today we will focus on chapter 10 of Aparecida Document, okay, which is about culture, and I will connect it to the kingdom vision of the reign of God at the end. Okay, now, so chapter 10 of Aparecida document speaks about our peoples and our culture. Okay, even though this is produced from in a South American context, which is very different culturally from our context, okay, the text is so meaningful that we can apply it to our context, Asian context. Okay, so basically, we need to understand what is culture. We are all familiar with this word, culture. Okay, in our own mother tongues, it could be translated differently. What do we really understand by culture? So before I go into my explanations about what is culture, I would like at least a few of you to unmute yourself and just share, speak aloud. What do you understand by culture? What do you think are the essential elements of culture? Anybody? Anything? When you hear culture, what comes to your mind? Who would like to say? What is culture? Nobody? Yes? Yes, Lubna.
Yes.
How do you
Yeah. Hello.
understand culture? Yeah.
I live in Pakistan and my province is Sindh. So when
Okay.
I talking about the culture,
Huh.
the suddenly Ajrak and Sindhi topi in my mind because the Sindhi culture is when we wear Ajrak, it means we represent a Sindh. So different things which represent us, which is very close to us.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when we see and we think about the culture,
Okay.
when we are wearing short shirt and kula, very uh, short shirt, and sometimes Punjabi is wearing a paranda.
Huh.
So it's also Punjabi culture.
Okay. Okay. Very good. So you associate culture with dress immediately, right? Okay. So we know very well, for example, Indian culture, anybody wearing sari, anywhere in the world, suddenly they'll say, oh, an Indian, right? Whereas here, in Kerala or my part of India, if we wear pants and shirt, they'll say, oh, you are in Western dress today. Okay, so culture is generally associated with dressing. Anything else? Anybody else?
Customs and social behavior of a particular society.
Okay, what do you mean by social behavior? Could you give me an example?
The way the people have their foods,
Okay,
their clothes,
very good. Yeah,
language.
yes. And
That's
the way people greet, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, in West they will hug and say hello. In India we say namaste. In Japan they will, or in East Asia they will bow their heads. It's true, the ways of greeting is so different. Okay, all these are culture. So you understand basically how do we look at culture? Okay, and we all of us live in cultures, no? Different cultures, mixed cultures. Okay, all that. So we will go a little more. Okay, so culture is broadly defined as the way of life of a people. Okay? So all of us. Even within India, we have so many cultures. So I'm sure in Pakistan or other places, depending on your province, you would have diversity. Okay. So basically, it is about the customary beliefs, shared values, symbols, all form part of a culture of a particular social religious group. So even within the country or within your own province, depending on if you're religion of one religion or another religion, culturally you could be different, right? And as you said now, language, customs, practices, religious traditions, which are handed over very faithfully from one generation to another, all these are vehicles of culture. Okay. Now, Aparecida, now I am getting back to the document. Aparecida speaks about culture and its evangelization. Okay. See, understanding culture is very important because we as laity, we are not living within the church premises, right? You are moving around with people in your workplace. We have people from different religions, different cultural backgrounds. So we are interacting with different cultures all the time. Okay, that is why it is very important to understand what is culture and how do we evangelize culture. Let's say Aparecida puts this, the title of this chapter, culture and its evangelization. So I'm quoting from Aparecida document number 476. It says, culture understood most broadly represents the particular way in which human beings and peoples cultivate their relationship to nature, with their fellow humans, with themselves, and with God, so as to attain a fully human existence. This is a very broad, okay, generalized definition of culture, but it makes sense because every group of people will, through their language, through their customs, give expression to how do they want to relate to nature. How do they relate with fellow human beings? Okay? How do they understand God? Hmm? And how do we really enjoy a fully human existence? So culture is very basic to that. Okay? Now, here again, before we get back to the document once again, I want to put certain things which will help us to understand the complexity of the cultures in which we live. So basically, I think we need to understand culture is marked by complexity. Okay. See, when we talk about what we eat or how we dress, things look very simple. Okay. People dress the way they like, particularly in cities. No? But in rural areas, they're not expected even to dress the way they want. They have to go abide by culture. So culture is very complex. We have something what we call traditional culture. Okay, sometimes even for all forum programs, not the online ones. One evening would be a cultural evening, and everyone will come with their traditional dresses and musical instruments and dance and all. That is traditional culture. Okay? And we have what we call modern culture. How do we live, go about every day? There is something called urban culture because the city life is very different from what is rural culture, right? Food habits, transport, everything is very different. So that is why basically it is good that culture is not something very simple, it is very complex. And another point I would like you to be aware is that every culture has positive values. Okay, definitely. However different it is from our culture, it has positive values. But in every culture, there are also things or beliefs which are not so positive. Okay, and some things of our own culture could be totally negative. Okay, so for example, even start with dressing. Sometimes people go with cultural dressing, and it can be very difficult when it is, in a very hot season. For For example, in Europe, people dress according to the weather. No, in winter they will put a lot of clothes. Summer they will remove and throw away. They will put bare minimum. But where in some of our communities, particularly in Asia, in India, very clearly, people are expected, particularly women are expected to dress according to traditional culture. Okay, and all the more in traditional communities. So sometimes there are elements of culture which are not helping. Okay, for example, caste system in India is something extremely negative. You know, even of late there has been what we call honor killings. If a boy or girl dares to fall in love with somebody who is outside of the caste or below their caste hierarchy, then the family members themselves may kill the other person, the spouse. You know? So these are very negative things of the culture. And so as laity, as Christian faithful, it is very important that we identify what is positive or life-giving, life-affirming in our cultures, and what is negating or denying life. Because our evangelization will depend on that. Okay, so that aspect is very important. So it is very important to discern cultural elements. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this term, no? Discernment, right? Discernment is like, you know, you are sorting out what holds value and what is just valueless. No? It's like when you harvest paddy. Oh, apparently everything looks the same, but you have to separate the rice, the paddy, which is good paddy, and the chaff, right? So that is discernment, discerning what is good and what is not so good. So every culture would have also laudable elements, means things which we really uphold, appreciate, like music, arts, architecture, and beautiful values, you know, like sharing, solidarity, hospitality. Okay, some cultures, some communities, culturally they are very hospitable. Okay, whereas, for example, India is known for its hospitality. People, even if you don't have anything, when a guest comes, they will give the best. But this may not be true if you go to the West. They'll be say you cannot go with a relative without taking an appointment. Okay, these are cultural differences. So again, I want you to make note that not everything is beautiful or admirable in a culture. Even though we love our music, all these are very, very beautiful. But there are deeper, harmful elements like racism. Okay, that is superiority, inferiority based on color. We may think, you know, racism was a thing of the past. Okay, when they had slavery and all. But in 2020, America practically burned with racist issues, no? I'm sure even from Asia we watched the whole tragic killing of George Floyd and the protests, no? Which over the theme Black Lives Matter. Okay? Patriarchy, where men are privileged and women are subjugated. Patriarchy is very much part of culture, and India is known for that. Particularly my part of India. Okay, culture is so patriarchal. Women are not expected to be this, to be that. Okay, you have to really jump over in order to free yourself. Casteism. Casteism is some people consider themselves great than others on the basis of wrong beliefs, not even right beliefs. These are some things, patriarchy, casteism from the Indian context. I'm sure we need to look at your own, for example, in Korea, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, okay, Philippines, wherever we are from. What is beautiful or admirable in our culture? And what is life denying? Okay, so that is where we as Christian laity have to be a little more attuned to understand, to discern our own culture. Okay, now culture and its evangelization. Okay. This also I'm not taking from the document per se. We'll come to that, but just to give you a little bit of background. Before Vatican II, evangelization meant taking Christian faith along with European culture to the distant lands and converting people to Christianity. Okay, so for example, now this document is from the Latin American context. You must have read in history with the colonizers, Christianity went to South America, okay, in 1500s, and they converted the whole continent, okay. So when they converted, they went with their own culture. So in most of the South American countries, people speak Spanish because the colonizers were Spaniards and the missionaries who took Christian faith went along with the colonizers. Okay, so they speak Spanish there. In India, in Asia, many countries and many countries of Africa, most of our countries were colonized by Europe. Okay, in India, because we have this tradition, my home community, which is Syro Malabar, they trace their roots to Saint Thomas the Apostle. So that community seems not so westernized, but it has other problems. It is very caste inscribed, etc. But India has had other colonization like the Portuguese coming into India to Goa, and they brought a Portuguese culture along with Christianity. Okay, so you can see many Catholic communities in India, in Bombay, Goa, wearing very Western dress. Okay, language is very different. So that was a pre-Vatican II experience where culture got identified, the local culture got identified with Christian faith without discerning what is faith, what is culture. Now, post-Vatican II, evangelization has acquired a new significance. Okay, you understand by the term what is meant by the term evangelization, right? Evangelization is to share the good news, to communicate Christian faith. Okay, now evangelization means taking good news to the different peoples and cultures of the world. That is why in Asia, in the post-Vatican II scenario, dialogue is considered a key component of evangelization. Any of you, if you have participated in all forum programs, you must have heard many times about the triple dialogue, right? Dialogue with the poor, dialogue with religions, dialogue with culture. And when we say dialogue, we cannot be like, somebody sitting there before me and talking to me. That is why we have to understand if we want to dialogue with a culture, we need to understand what is healthy in our culture, okay? What is not healthy, what is denying life. Okay, so that discernment is very important if you really want to dialogue. Okay, now I get back to the Aparecida document. In number 479, it speaks about inculturation of the faith. Are you all familiar with the term inculturation? Anybody has heard? I'm sure the sisters must have heard during your formation. You all know the term inculturation? Anyone? Yeah?
No, I don't know.
Duana. Inculturation means the faith.
Yes, I know.
Yes. Yes. What do you understand by inculturation? Huawei? That's your phone.
It's Salman.
It's Salman. Yes, Salman. Say what you understand about inculturation. Oh, what have you heard about inculturation?
Yes, when I was in the seminary, this course held by Father Mario, who was
Okay.
from Sri Lanka.
All right. Okay.
So we did the course inculturation. That inculturation is when we relate our faith with
Okay.
any culture
Uh-huh.
or We practice
Mhm.
faith but different culture. Hello,
You give different expressions. Yeah, right. I'm hearing you. Yes, Salman.
hello.
Yes, you can speak. I think you're getting muted in between, no? Okay. So what Salman is trying to say is when you practice your faith, you take certain elements of your culture to give expression to your faith, right? Okay. So earlier, as I said, no, see before Vatican II, culture and faith were so identified, but it was all European culture. Okay, masses, Eucharist was celebrated in Latin. People didn't understand the word. Okay, so with this notion of inculturation, after Vatican II, people started saying, okay, there are certain beautiful things in this culture, we can adapt that. Okay, for example, I'll give you an example from India. Now, the term Jyoti, okay, Jyoti means light. And before Vatican II, many Hindu girls would have names Jyoti. But these missionaries who came, they didn't understand what Jyoti meant. So they said, no, no, that is Hindu name. Don't, let us not take it. So they would give some Katharina, Scholastica, like that, names of saints from Europe. Okay. And they may even give the name Luz. Luz means light in their language. Only later people started understanding this is the vernacular, the local language for the same concept called light. So after Vatican II, with this inculturation, you are taking certain good things from the local culture to express your faith. Okay. So in India, they started singing bhajans. Bhajans is a repetitive form of singing which was earlier heard only in temples. Okay, so like that, now people started looking at what is good in culture and what is not so good. So Aparecida in number 479 speaks about every culture having its lights and shadows, as I said earlier. So according to this number, we must consider that culture with empathy in order to understand it. Okay, we have to see wherever we are staying, for example, Pakistan, Christians are a minority, okay, and all around you are Muslims. But I'm sure Pakistani Christians are living, taking a lot of elements even of Islamic culture which can be adapted to Christian faith, right? In India, we have started doing that. The churches, some churches are built in, taking Hindu elements, which are good in that element. So we need to understand, and according to this document, we also need to take a critical stance. What is a critical stance? You don't jump and take everything of that culture. You need to critically discern whatever within it is the product of human limitation and sin. Okay? For example, I said caste in India is clearly very sinful. But unfortunately, some of our churches have become so caste, conscious. Their mindset is very much marked by caste, right? Patriarchy in the Indian culture is very wrong, but very uncritically, churches have adapted that. Okay, so that is where inculturation means the church is enriched. I come to the last paragraph with new expressions and values, manifesting and celebrating ever better the mystery of Christ in the contemporary culture. Means to say, in simple terms, it means to say the church, Christian faith can adapt, means make its own the good elements of the culture. It could be linguistic elements, language. It could be vestments, dressing. It could be many things, songs. Okay. But at the same time, we should be able to take a critical stance. Okay, don't take every nonsense. Throw away what is not helping. Throw away what is sinful. Okay, that is meant by inculturation of faith. Okay, now we come to evangelization of cultures. According to them, taking fully from the document. Okay, evangelization of cultures means to say, I said no, evangelization means to take the good news. Okay, the gospel. That is the biggest asset that we have as Christians. Okay. Now, how do we evangelize cultures? So, according to, I'm just taking few numbers which I thought was very meaningful. Okay. Education for integral formation. I'm sure in all our countries, education is a big platform. In India, church institutions play a very major role in education. Okay. So particularly of children and youth. Now we have lot of state universities and institutions run by NGOs which are not Christian. Okay, so how do we Christians look at education? Is it only to give people grades and degrees, and are we focusing on the integral formation of people? This also applies to faith formation of young people and adults. Faith formation in our churches are done in different platforms. Okay, it can be from the altar, okay, during homilies, but so many other faith formation programs, and even programs of all foreign focus on education. Okay, even though we do it in a different style. So important thing is integral formation. Integral formation means you're forming the whole person, not just the head of the person, the brains of the person. Okay, the emotions, the vision. That is why we have to put all this. What is the kingdom vision? How do we look at cultures? Now, another important aspect brought out by Aparecida is pastoral ministry for social communications. Okay, the print media, visual media, TV, films, social media. We understand now, in 20th, 21st century, late 20th century, particularly in the 21st century, social media is the media. Okay? Now, how do we train ourselves with critical training in the use of media? Media is a very strong vehicle of culture. Okay, so do we just take in everything that is shown coming by through social media, or are we discerning? Okay, can we take in what is good and throw away what is not good? So in number 487, Aparecida document says, using the new world of cyberspace to proclaim the gospel message. Okay, because cyberspace is everywhere. Now, evangelization of cultures. This I'll go through very fast. No? It is talking about, now there are new spaces created. One is the world of communications that we mentioned earlier. Now there are a lot of, I'm sure in all your countries, there are social movements, liberative movements, movements committed to justice, what we call people's movement. Okay? Each country would have, each particular context would have different people's movements. So Aparecida speaks about peace building movements, liberation of people, particularly of minorities, promotion of women and children, commitment to ecology and protection of nature. All of you must be familiar with Greta Thunberg, no? Young girl, but she has become very powerful as a prophet of ecology, and everybody would take her seriously. Okay? So it speaks about how evangelization, all these are mediums of culture. Okay? So how evangelization has to permeate, have to penetrate these platforms. Scientific research Generally, we think scientific research is only when you're doing a master's degree or a PhD and all that. No, research is very beautiful. Okay, and we have to. Research means you are looking, searching into something. International relations. Now, nowhere in the world can we live saying, I and my country. No, my country is so much affected by what is happening in the country next to mine, what is happening in the West. Okay, so everything is so deeply interconnected. So these are new spaces where we need to evangelize. It speaks also about new pastoral fields. Okay, see, I was getting amused seeing this. No? Aparecida speaks about Ministry of Tourism and Entertainment. Earlier, it was considered something totally of the world and church was somewhere else. Now we are talking about how evangelization has to touch these areas because people are traveling a lot. So, entertainment, sports, movie theaters, malls, okay, all this draw attention and call believers, call for being evangelized. Okay. Now, integration of faith and science, that is another important area. Earlier, science was considered something people who were into science thought they had nothing to do with faith. But now there is more and more greater dialogue between faith and science. So, how the two have to be integrated because it is seeing the beauty and of the nature and science of the mystery of God is far beyond. Okay? Beyond what we can understand with our little minds. So how that this dialogue has to be between faith and science. Another important thing, no? See, Aparecida has this beautiful number 496, where it says God is not only the highest truth, but also the highest goodness and the supreme beauty. How beautiful. So it says society needs artists. Okay? Just as it needs scientists, technicians, workers, professional people, witnesses of faith, teachers, fathers, mothers, who ensure the growth of the person and development of the community by means of the supreme art, for which is art of education. And here we are not talking about classroom education, we are talking about human formation. Okay? And beauty, God is so much there in the work of the artists. Okay, so all this is very beautiful. Now, Laity and as disciples and missionaries in public life, that is also very important. The last numbers of Aparecida, chapter 10. Because earlier there was such a, if you look at in the next classes, we will look church, politics, okay, all that. There's been a great divide. Okay, let politics live, political leaders live their lives, and church people will live their life. Now, the laity are invited. Okay, presence, it is so important to have presence of well-formed laity in the political sphere. Okay? We need good politicians who have good value systems in the world of the media, in the universities, in the voices and initiatives of Catholic leaders with strong personalities and generous dedication, who are coherent. Who are coherent means who don't say something and do something else, but who practice what they preach, coherent in their ethical and religious convictions. Okay? So it is inviting laity to enter politics. See, you understand now the mission of laity. Culture is so important. Now, continuing this, lay people of our continent who are conscious of their call to holiness, okay, by virtue of their baptismal vocation, act as a leaven in the dough, okay, to build a temporal city. So it is not that, my life in the church I am one person. When I go to work, I'm somebody else. No. Coherence between faith and life in the political, economic, and social realm. Both need to come together. That is the beauty of Christian life. Okay? It also speaks, I'll go very fast, urban ministry. Okay? Because urbanization is increasing in all our countries. Okay? Now, you can read that later. But pay special attention to the world of urban suffering. Okay, at least in the rural areas, you will have something to eat. You have a place where you can sleep. But in cities, when more and more people migrate, many fall by the wayside. Prisoners, the excluded, drug addicts. Okay, all that. Now, one of the last numbers is laity at the service of the unity and fraternity of all peoples. I'm sure all of you must have heard the latest encyclical that has come from Pope Francis. Can any of you students tell me the name of that encyclical? What is the latest encyclical from Pope Francis?
Fratelli Tutti.
Very good, Jerry. Fratelli Tutti. So this number, even though this is written about how many years ago, this was written in 2007, is speaking about that same thing. It is a unity that is very far from being reduced to uniformity. Okay? You understand by uniformity, all of us wear the same type of dressing, all of us speak the same language or practice the same religion. No. Okay? Unity is enriched by local, national, and cultural diversities. That is the beauty. And our Asian continent is so diverse. That is why we, as Christian faithful, as laity, who are in this ordinary world of work, living, family life, neighborhood, where there are so many people from different cultures, different religions, we have a mission of bringing people together, fraternity, okay, brotherhood, sisterhood of all peoples. Now, this is my addition, combining last session. Okay, you remember last time when we said culture, we spoke about the reign of God, and I said the reign of God, when Jesus initiated the reign of God, it was very counter-cultural. Okay, Jesus did not go with the Jewish culture where the rabbi, the priest, those who were experts in the law, they said, we know God, and all these others are outcast. They treated the others like dirt. Okay, don't come anywhere near me. Women had no place at all. And what did Jesus do? I told you in the last class, Jesus broke those boundaries. So the vision of the reign of God is very counter-cultural to a culture that is oppressive. Okay? It is built on inclusion that way. In the kingdom of God, KINDOM, kinship, what I like to call the kinship politics of the reign of God, there is no black people, there is no white people, there is no racism. Okay? Because all are one. There is no male, there is no female. In that vision, all have the same place. There is no high caste, there is no low caste. So we have to see how is the vision of kingdom, how it should become countercultural in your context. Okay? So according to the vision of the reign of God, the kingdom politics of the reign of God, black lives matter, just as white lives matter. Lives on the fringes, margins matter. Okay, the poor matter just as the rich matters. So we cannot just say, oh, I am rich, I am somebody, my life is important, my dignity is important. If my dignity is important, the dignity of somebody who is on the margins is equally important. Okay? Gender justice matters. That is the counter-cultural politics. And I repeat, when we say politics here, it is not about party politics. It's the way we understand power. How is power exercised? Is somebody being dominated or are people liberated? Do everyone have breathing space? You know, when George Floyd was being suffocated, we had a famous picture, no? When this man, the police, had his knee on his neck and he said, I can't breathe. That phrase became viral. Why? People started applying not only to physical suffocation. When people are dominated, there is intellectual suffocation, there is emotional suffocation, there is economic suffocation. Okay? So, what people say, I can't breathe, I need breathing space. That is the counter-cultural politics of the reign of God. We have to understand what in my culture is oppressive of somebody else that needs to be removed, and what in my culture is so beautiful, so life-giving that needs to be affirmed. Now, in this kingdom politics of the reign of God, it is not only human beings who matter, care of the earth matters. Now we are talking about care of the earth because climate change has become so drastic. People know we will all die, perish if we don't do anything. But here we are looking at, you know, I'm sure you are familiar with another encyclical written by Pope Francis on ecology. Can somebody tell me what it is called?
Laudato Si.
Very good. Jayani, very good. You seem to be an expert on Pope Francis or on the encyclicals. Very good. So, care of the earth. And in Laudato Si, Pope Francis speaks about the earth as a common home. See, all of us, maybe my house is small, but that is my house. I'm proud of it. I take care of it. Okay? In the same way, how do we care for our common home? So all that is the politics, the culture, and the reign of God. Okay? Now,